Alright, so we're going to pick up right about here where we left off last time. So we have our orange juice group. So it has the glass, it has the orange juice inside it, and has then we have our cereal bowl here. And so what we want to do is fill the cereal bowl obviously with cereal. So there's a couple different ways we can do that. What we're going to do is use what's called MoGraph, okay? And it's basically like just a bunch of really cool animation tools that we can use. So just to kind of step aside from this, I'm just going to make a cube. There he is. And I'm going to go to MoGraph. I'm going to create a cloner. Okay. Now this cloner by itself is right here. It's just nothing. Okay. Because it doesn't know what to clone. So like a lot of things inside of Cinema, you have to associate things together. So I have to associate this cube with the clone. So I have to drag the cube into the cloner. Okay. So you see that my cube, where it was, has disappeared. And now I have basically, it looks like a tall cube right there. But it's not actually a tall cube. What it is 3 cubes stacked pretty much intersecting each other. If I go to my display and I go to lines, you can see there's definitely like extra stuff on top of it. So I'm going to go over here to my options, and you can see I can add more cubes. I could change the offset of where they're at. I can scroll down here to where the offset is and adjust it. So now you can actually see a little bit better that there's cubes there. Okay. So there's different ways that we could create this. Like this is linear right now. So I could do radial, which would do it in a round fashion. Okay. And all of these things can be animated. So you could actually animate these types of things, which is pretty neat. You can control, you know, how these things are going together and all that stuff. Offset variations. So now they're all not lined up perfectly. Okay, so lots of different things you can do. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this object one. You see my stuff disappears because it doesn't know what to do. So what I want to do is I want to fill an object inside here with my stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make really quickly just a little cylinder. I'm going to pull it up, make it biggie. Squish this down. And this is essentially going to be like where the cereal is. So let's say like that. Plenty of divisions on here. I'm going to hit C. I'm going to go to my front view. And you can see where this is intersecting the side of the bowl, like right there. So I'm just going to click on that and go to my points. Go to my marquee selection. Make sure that tolerant is can be on, and then only visible is turned off. And then I'm just going to scale. As I scale that down, it's going to make it just a smidge smaller than the bowl. Okay, and do the same thing on the top. That way it fits a little bit better. All right, so that's where I want my cereal to be. Now I don't need to fill the entire bowl with this because the bowl isn't transparent. So my cereal is basically just going to be like floating in this top area. So now that I have this shape, I'm going to go to my cloner. I've already set that to object, and I'm going to drop my cylinder into this object shape. And so you'll see that my cube that's inside the cloner is getting cloned at the cylinder. Now, how is it getting cloned? Let's go back to the cloner. And right now it's doing a, you'll see it says clones iterate. For right now, this is just fine. Okay, we only have one object in here, so we're just going to leave it at iterate. If we scroll down further, it'll say distribution vertex. So basically, wherever there's a point or a vertex on the cylinder, it's going to make a cube. So I want to change this to volume. And now you'll see that it kind of fills the volume of that shape. And depending on my count here, I could add more or less. Okay. Now I don't want the cubes, obviously, like what cereal is cubes? That makes sense. So let's delete the cubes. You'll see the cloner is still here. All the options are still here. It's one of the nice things about Cinema. I'm going to make a torus. Okay. So imagine you have something like a Cheerio or a Fruit Loop or some nice looking cereal. I'm going to take my ring segments down to maybe 18. My pipe segments down to, let's say, 9. Just because I'm going to have a lot of these, I don't want to like really complicate the scene. I'm going to shrink my radius down, shrink my pipe radius down, until I get something that looks about the size of a Cheerio or a Fruit Loop or something like that. There we go. So that looks like an appropriate size. Okay. You don't want it to look like SpaghettiOs. Maybe I need a little bit more thickness. Too much. Like that. Alright, that looks good. Alright, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to drop this into the cloner. And because of how it's already set up, you'll see that it just automatically populates the entire scene or the entire shape with these things. Pretty cool. I can always go back to the cloner. I can change it. Now, anytime you see these sliders and it stops like at the bar, you can still come to the arrows here and crank it up further or type in a number. Okay. Now we typically or realistically shouldn't need that many of these, but we'll see how many we'll need once we let it go. So there's all my stuff. Now they're intersecting. We definitely don't want that because even though we're going to be kind of far away from it, it still is going to look funny, especially if we're here, we see all these things intersecting, it's going to look odd. So I don't want them to be visible. I also don't need this cylinder visible right now either. So I can just click the dots here and there. And that way I don't need to see that cylinder, because all I want to do is see this shape right here. Okay. Eventually we'll turn the cylinder back on and give it, you know, some color, or duplicate it and give it some color, and that'll be like the milk. So for now I'm just going to go back to my cloner, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make these things dynamic. So I want them to basically like go through and figure out where they're colliding and stop doing that. Okay. So I'm going to go to my cloner here. I'm going to go to tags, and under the simulation I'm going to add a rigid body simulation tag. So you'll see that we get this little tag right here, and what that does is it makes these things dynamic. Okay. So if I go forward a frame, there you go, and I'll go forward a couple frames, you can see how they're all falling down. Okay. So right now there's nothing for them to collide with. They're just like floating through space. So I'm going to go to my cylinder, that was the milk. I'm going to go to tags, simulation, and I'm going to tell it to be a colliding object. Okay. So I'll do that again. I'll go frame by frame. Okay. And you'll see it's going to act kind of funny. It's actually like stuck together, right? So when we put a dynamics tag on something like this, because I put it on the cloner, it's treating the cloner as one big object. Okay. So I want to tell it not to treat it as one big object, to tell it to treat each individual piece of this as a separate item. Okay, each one of them, like Cheerios or whatever, as a separate item. So if I go to my cloner, if I go to my dynamics tab, there we go. On the collisions, I'm going to say inherit tag, apply tag to children. So what that means is apply this to all the clones that you have. And the individual elements is just the top level stuff. So this is the individual element, but all of these are going to be the dynamic pieces. So now I'll rewind it, and anytime you do dynamics, make sure you rewind it all the way to the beginning with this button, and then you go frame by frame with this button. And you can see the shortcut key is G, so you can actually just hit G. You'll see, hooray! It's like confetti. Now you can rewind and hit play. Sometimes it'll like lock up. Okay, so definitely not something we want, but we're getting closer. So let me go to the cylinder dynamic. So I'm going to click on the dynamic tab. Under the collision here, I'm going to say that the shape is going to be a static mesh. Okay, what that means is the shape isn't moving. This cylinder doesn't go anywhere. All it needs to do is collide with these pieces. So then I will rewind. I will hit G a couple more times. And you'll see that it definitely goes all over the place. Okay. Now all of them aren't going all over the place, just a few of them. Now the reason for that, let me rewind it, is these pieces here, I've duplicated it so many times that there's too many of them to fit inside this cylinder. So I need to go back to my cloner, shrink this down to a manageable number, like let's say 100, and then hit G a couple times, And you'll see we definitely get a lot less that are bouncing out. So let's rewind it again. Shrink it down to even less. So let's say 74. There we go. Definitely less moving around. Now I may need to also come into my torus and shrink this. So maybe I'll take this to 10 for my ring radius and 3 for the pipe radius. Okay, so you can see how thin they are. Yeah, a little bit too thin. Let's go 4, maybe 5. There we go. That's good. Okay, rewind it again. We'll hit G. And now you can see we're getting something where they're staying inside there. If one of them leaves, that's no big deal because we just don't care about that one, because once he leaves this area, he's gone. Okay. Alright, so I can rewind this, and then I could say, well, now I need more. So I can go back to my cloner, maybe add a couple more, and just try to find a good balance where we don't have anything happening crazily. Now the other thing we can do is we can change this seed number. So if we change this seed, basically it's going to choose a different pattern of randomness. Okay, so I change it to whatever, I hit go, you'll see that my one that falls out now falls out over here and not way back there. Not a huge deal, but something to keep in mind. Okay, I'm going to rewind this again. Now the other thing that may help us is everything is kind of straight up and down. I may want to have these things kind of rotated a bit. So if I go to my cloner, yep, and I go to MoGraph and I go to effector, these are things that affect cloners or affect the MoGraph stuff. So I'm going to go to this one that says random, and what it does is on my cloner here, under the effectors, it creates this random tag. So if I uncheck it or recheck it, you'll see what we get, a little bit different result. Okay, so if I go back to the random tag, right now it's doing position. It's randomizing the position. I don't need position, so I'm going to uncheck that. I do want rotation, so I will click rotation, and then I will adjust the rotation. Now this one is going left and right. That doesn't help me. Let's just reset that. This one goes that way, cool. This one goes that way, cool. So now I have basically a pretty decent selection or direction of these things. So now I've rewound it. I'm gonna hit G a couple times. Okay, there's 3 of them flying out. Like I said, not a huge deal. I actually probably want to rewind this and add maybe a bit more. So under my object, there it is. So adding some more into the count. And then G a couple more times. And then what we want to make sure that doesn't happen is it'll land on that thing and then sit there. So I need to rewind it. Maybe I'll play with my seed a little bit. And when you're dealing with dynamics, this is the kind of stuff that happens, is they just kind of like fly out. And like I said, it's no big deal. We'll let them fly out. We'll just ignore them. I can just hit play too. There we go. Not too much is going on, so we're actually able to do that. Okay, so now we have this nice mixture, and none of these are colliding with each other, which is really, really awesome. Or none of these are intersecting each other. So cool. We'll still be playing with this, so I'm not like set on this. I realize this one is still floating. Okay, so now I need to give these things a color, and I want to vary the color a bit. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just the straightforward method to do it. Is I'm going to make a material. Okay, so I'm going to color this what I want my cereal to be colored. So if this was Fruit Loops, obviously they're different colors. Or if they're fruit flavored Cheerios, it would also be different colors. There we go. So it's kind of like this, like light green. I can go with my model here, and you can see how I can change how this is affecting that. Okay, so it's subtle. I think we leave it in Lambert. I can also adjust my fall off. So what the fall off is going to do is allow me to spread that diffuse a little bit further. If I go this way, you'll see how much darker it's going to be. So for something like cereal, I want to pull it back a little bit more. Okay. Also on reflectance, not a whole lot of reflection here, but we do want to adjust maybe the global specular. Oops, I grabbed the wrong one. the global specular of this just to kind of soften it a bit. That's good. Now we also do want to have a bump on here. So I'm going to go to my basic tab. I'm going to click on bump. And then under bump, I'm going to click the arrow and find a noise pattern. So see where it says noise? So now we have this kind of grainy look to it. All right. So I'm going to drag this onto my torus. Okay. Not onto the cloner, because the cloner would assign it to everything underneath the cloner. We don't want that. So now if we were just to hit Control R, you'll see that we have this kind of like bumpy pattern. So it's way too much bump, and it's actually probably a bit big. So we'll go back to the material. Here's our bump, so we can click on this. And then here's our global scale. So we'll set this to like 20. We'll hit Control R again. And now you can see how much softer that's going to be. So I just want to give it a little bit of grain, just so it's not perfect, right? If I need to get back to where I can adjust how deep it is, how like dark these areas are, I click this arrow, and then it takes me back to the bump, and then I could shrink this down. All right, so that looks pretty good at 0.9. Now some of these areas are really dark because we don't have a light in the scene. Once we get a light, we'll be able to see it a little bit better. I'm actually going to take it up just a bit more to like 15. There we go. Cool. All right, so there's our green ones. So now I need more of these. I need a red, a blue, a yellow, or whatever. So first thing, let me go back to my material. Let me go back to Basic, and let me give this a name. And this is going to be Cereal_01. Okay, so I know it's my cereal material. Cereal material. So I'm going to click and drag holding Control on this. Okay, and when I do that, you'll see I get an extra torus. Control drag again, Control drag again, Control drag again. So now I have 5 different toruses. And if I drop all of these into my cloner, we're not really going to notice a big difference because all of these have the same exact properties. Let me just put these in order so that it says torus, torus, 1, 2, 3. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to hold Control and just drag this over. Okay. So I have 5 toruses. I need 5 of these. And I'm just going to go to each color and just shift the color over. So there's kind of this orangey one. More of like a red one. It's more of like a blue one. There we go. And let's say a little bit of a yellow one right here. Okay. I could even duplicate and have a purple one if I wanted. So I'm going to delete the greens from here. So I just click on those. I'll highlight them and delete. You'll see that some of these go away. And then I can just drag the orange onto one, the red onto one, the blue onto one, and the yellow onto one. Okay. So now we have a nice little mixture of all these different colors in here. Okay. Just by adding these in there. Now if we go back to the cloner, this iterate, what it's doing is it's when it makes one cloned object, it's going here, then it makes 2, then it goes 3, and then 4, and then 5, and then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's just cycling through each one of these. So we should have a pretty even amount. We have 183, so if there's an even way that 5 could go into that, then it would be perfectly even, but it's not. So that would be perfectly even at 180. But it doesn't matter. No one's counting them. Okay. So now we have a nice little assortment of these things. So now when I hit G, I've rewound, and I'm hitting G. Yep, there's a lot going everywhere. Let me just fix my stuff here. There you go. I think that's still maybe a little bit too many. So let's take this down to 100. What we don't want is too few that they it looks empty in there. Okay, like that looks pretty weird having them all float like that. So I gotta find like a good number. Let's see. Okay, and I also have to make sure they're not resting on top because you'll see that there are some that would float just based on where they're at. So I'm going to give it a little bit more randomness there. Nope, still kind of floating around. Random. Oops. Nope, that wasn't right. Alright, so I'm just going to have to keep playing with this until I find something that looks correct. There we go. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I have some that are kind of on an angle, some that are bunched up, some that are laying flat. Okay, so that gives me a nice little selection here. So what I need to do is I say, okay, this is how I want this to start off. Every time I rewind it, it's going to jump back to here. And that's going to look weird. I couldn't have these things floating in milk because they typically don't float like that or intersect like that. So I need to go to where they're kind of at rest. Like that. Oops. Just like one frame too many. When I wait for this guy to get out of frame, I may need to add some more frames to this. There we go. So now he's gone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my cloner once I'm happy with the way that these are distributed. Go to my cloner, go to my rigid body and my dynamics. I'm going to say set the initial state. And what this means is where you're at now, stay there. Okay, so when I rewind this, I want that to stay just like that. I'm also going to go to my dynamics and turn this off. So now when I rewind it, you'll see it stays exactly there. When I hit play, they don't move. Okay, which is important because if you did enable dynamics, it would actually start moving again. So cool. All right, so now I can turn my cylinder back on maybe. Okay, now you'll see that the cylinder is actually covering them. I don't want it to cover them. All right, so I'm going to duplicate the cylinder. So I'm just holding control and dragging. And then I can delete stuff like the dynamics tab. I don't need that. Keep the rest of the stuff on here. That's good. I'm going to turn my little there you go, boxes off. And so now what I can do is just scoot this down. And so what I'm going to do is just try to find a good level so that it looks like these things are actually in the milk. Okay, so something like that-ish. All right, so that looks pretty decent. Cool. So now let's give this some color. So I'm going to double click, drop this material onto here, and we'll call this one milk. Probably save, there we go. Let's see, so we should have some reflectance in here, so I'm going to change this to default. I'm going to change this to Beckman. And then I could adjust my milk. Now milk has a pretty sharp specular on it, so it's not, you can see it's not like this where it's nice and soft. It's actually pretty sharp, like that. And then the reflection strength, I'm just going to pull up a little bit. Okay. So now we'll hit Control R and take a look and see what it looks like. Yeah, it looks all right. I can go back to the color and give us a little bit more white. Go back to my reflection, maybe add a little bit more reflection in there. There we go. It's looking a bit more like milk. I want to get in a bit closer and render it again. Doesn't look like I'm picking up too much of the reflection though. Let me crank this way up. There you go. Now I can see some of that reflection coming through. And some of this you can't see until you get a little bit further into the scene. A little bit more things going on, lights and whatever else. So right now it looks like it's just solid, like a solid frozen cup of milk. So I'm going to go to my basic tab. I'm going to add a bump. And actually not a bump. I'm going to add displacement. Okay, back to displacement. And what this is going to do is a bump map is kind of like a fake bump. Okay, but a displacement is not. A displacement actually does move the surface. So I'm going to add a noise to this. And you can see how it looks kind of fraggly. I'm going to save, hit Control R to render. And maybe we can see it a little bit more. Let me take the height up some just so you can really see this thing move. Not that much. There we go. So now you can see that this milk is actually moving a bit. It's not perfectly rounded. It is actually distorting the shape of the milk. So if I rewind it or render it from back here, you'll see that we have definitely a different kind of shape to it. So 12 is way too much. I could just knock the strength down some. And that will definitely help it. And it just gives it a little bit more appearance. Now I'm still going to add a bump to this. Just I want to break up some of those reflections. Okay, so on the bump I'm going to add a noise pattern. Okay, and it's going to be really like odd looking milk. So I'll go to my noise. I'm going to take the scale up on this one. And what that will do is give me bigger patterns. So now you see I have these like wavier lines. Hit the up arrow a bit. Knock my strength down. Maybe blur this a little bit. It's looking better. I'll go to my noise and maybe just increase the global scale a little bit more. There we go. So now it looks like it has some more detail in there as opposed to just being flat. Okay, and we can still move it. If we decided we want to take that cylinder and just pull it up a little bit more, we can still do that and adjust where it's at. Alright, so that looks pretty good like that. Cool. And then the last thing we need to do for our bowl here is we need to make a spoon, and then texture that obviously, and then texture our bowl. So let's make the spoon first. Okay, so I'm going to go to my cube. I'm going to shrink this in. Shrink it in this way. So think of this as basically we're not making the spoon, we're just making the handle for the spoon. Okay, so I'm shoving this over here. That should be good. Maybe a little bit thinner. And I'm going to put a segment right in the Z direction. Okay, so I have a segment basically splitting this down the middle. Okay, so I'm going to hit C. And then I'm going to go to my faces and grab these faces here. I'm going to hit D and then pull it up. Okay, and then I can just scoot that over. Switch to edge mode. Let's turn tolerant off, just so I grab these. There we go. I'm going to rotate it. I probably need to rotate, oops, these also. There we go. Now it looks pretty horrible, but once I add a subdiv to it, then it'll smooth it out. So I'm going to go back to faces here. I'm going to go back to extruding. Just extrude that out a little bit. Go to my edges. And we'll just add a little bevel to this. Not so many divisions. There we go. Alright, so now let's go to my cube. I'm going to hold down Alt and add the subdiv. Okay, so now I have my spoon inside my bowl. Now it looks kind of weird on this end. It looks like it's kind of crimping. So if I switch back to the cube, I can turn my subdiv off. I switch back to faces. And well, I just need to marquee those bottom faces, so I'm just going to hit the marquee tool and marquee them. And then I'm just going to hit delete. Then when I turn this back on, you'll see that we have a nice little line that comes out of there. Okay, so now I can grab, let's say, this edge right here. And I'm just going to push it in and push it down. There we go. And so all it does is just give the spoon a little bit more shape to it instead of being just a perfectly flat spoon. All right, so now let's get a material for that. So I'm going to double click, go to the basic tab, call it what it is, spoon. And then this one, we're going to basically take the brightness of the color down, go to my reflection, change this to Beckman, and then crank the reflection up and specular, or the roughness down. There we go. So then we'll get this, which is, you know, nice little reflection on there. And of course, drop it on here to assign it. And then we can hit Control S to save, Control R to render. We'll get a nice little reflection on there. Okay, and once the scene's complete, it'll obviously be a little bit easier to see all that stuff. All right, so then what next? The bowl. So let's grab a new material, basic, bowl. This is going to be driven by color and reflection are the two major ones. Okay, so back to here, back to Beckman, give us a little bit of reflection. Take the roughness down. There we go. So this is the reflection only. This is our material so far. So I want this to look kind of like a porcelain ceramic bowl type thing. So if I give it a color, you know, that's pretty sufficient, you know, as far as, you know, having something on there. I'm going to find an image eventually, but for now I'm just going to leave it as a color. Okay. So then I can drop this onto here. Cool. All right, and then we'll just render this. So that looks pretty much like a nice little cereal bowl. We got milk in it, we got our spoon. Let's jump over here real quick and texture this stuff while we're texturing things. So double click, click this, basic, glass. The color for this, we can basically make it like a bluish tint. Okay. I'll take the brightness of this down because under my basic tab I want to put transparency, and my transparency is going to be driving this thing. Now if I go to refraction presets, you'll see there's actually one in here for glass. So now if I were to drop this onto my glass, I hit Control R to render, you'll see that we get this nice little looking glass. If we needed to, we can tint it a bit more, either in the color by pulling this up some and pulling the transparency down a bit more. So now you can see I have a blue glass. Or you can actually tint it right here. If I go to this, now it's tinting that even more inside of there. Okay, so that's pretty neat. Alright, so I can play with this, you know, for hours just tweaking that. So now let's go to the OJ. So I'm going to double click, click on this. Choose. There will be some transparency to this. That should be good. Alright, so color. I'm going to give it that orange color. Should be good there. Go to transparency. Give it that same orangish color. Drop this on here. And it's always good, you know, especially when you're starting off, to render things out and see how it looks. Especially from where you're going to see it. So we're going to see it from kind of back here. Let me get rid of that blue. The blue is just too strong. So I'm just going to take the saturation down here. Go to my color. Take the saturation down. And then we have to decide, is the blue distracting it? I think it's still like way too blue. There we go. Okay, so there's my orange juice. Now I can go into my reflection. Here are some different transparency options too when you turn transparency on. So we can adjust the roughness of this if we wanted to blur our transparency. I'm going to go back to default specular, change this to Beckman. And Beckman just gives you different options for your stuff and looks a little bit better. So I'm adding some reflection to it. And you can see it's taking a bit longer now because I have extra reflections on here. The importance isn't to get it 100% right in your first go. The importance is that you get it roughly there, and then once you start adding your other stuff, then you can come back and tweak it. Okay, so that's looking good. So I'm gonna hit escape. All right, now let's go to the straw. Oops, don't need to double click that. Go to basic, straw, and yeah, it should be good with just that stuff. So I'm gonna go to my color here. Give it a white straw just to have some nice contrast in there. Let me turn my wireframe off. Yeah, that's pretty much all we need on there. Maybe just adjust the specular a little bit. Roughness. And you can see how much longer it's taking on that orange juice just because we have basically transparency with transparency, so we have refractions within refractions. And we are getting the, you can see that the straw is definitely bending inside the glass, which is what we want. All right, that's cool. All right, so it's definitely looking good with what we have. Maybe the straw should come down a little bit more and be actually like the bottom of the glass. Okay, cool. All right, so let's start organizing some of our stuff here. Save it. So we have our subdivision surface, which is our bowl, right? Let me move this glass down to the bottom here just to get out of the way. So subdivision surface, which is our bowl, our cloner, which is our cereal, our cylinder, which is the container that collides with the cereal and places it, our other one, which is the milk, our random placement of those cereal, and then we have our spoon. Okay, so I'm going to go to the very top node of each thing and identify what the major pieces are. So spoon, bowl, cereal, underscore, cloner, milk, cereal, collider. Okay, and then the random is just a random. So I'm going to take all of these things. I'm going to hit Alt-G. And just call this cereal bowl. Go to my layers. Add the objects to the layer. Okay, you'll see that some of them go away. Again, sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. So I'm just going to add each item to that. There we go. So now we can turn it on or turn it off. Now, because this is dynamic, it actually could have a hard time moving sometimes. So if you just tried to move it, it may not move. Okay, so we just have to be aware of that as we go forward. So I'm just going to set this back here by the juice cup so I have my main area free still. Coolio. So I can lock my juice glass, lock my cereal bowl for now. I don't need to adjust any of those. And then I can go on to my next things, which is going to be my cereal box. So I click a cube. Let me switch back my attributes. Pull it up. Make it big like this. Make it big like this. Again, look at the proportions of all the stuff in the scene. So that looks like a pretty decent size cereal box. Okay, we don't want to even go like too big because then we're going to have a hard time framing it. So I think right there is actually a pretty good size. Okay, now I do want to put on some bevels on this. So I'm going to go to C, To make it an object, go to my edges, grab all my edges. I'm going to hit MS, add a little bevel on there. That looks good. And our cereal box is modeled. Okay. Now I do have to put the texture on here, which is going to be a bit trickier than what we've done before. So for now, I'm just going to call this cereal box, add it to a layer, and then we'll come back to that part where we actually go through and texture it. Need to get out of the way first. There we go. Okay. And then the last item that we need to model is going to be a coffee mug. So you can use splines if you wanted to start off with a spline to create it. I'm actually going to use it a different way. I'm going to start off with a cylinder. I'll pull it up. Okay, that's a huge coffee cup right now. Maybe not, maybe it's appropriate. That looks good. Yep, that'll work. Alright, so here's our coffee cup. So I'm going to go to my attributes. I'm going to turn on my shading. And I want a couple height lines in here. Like, that should be good. 6 should be good because I need to put a handle on here somewhere. I'm also going to jump to the top view. Oh, so just fallen cereal. And what I wanted to do is, there you go. I'm going to look at the display wireframes here. I need to have one of these edges perfectly lined up with the side here. Okay, so if I set this to, let's say, 35, you'll see that this side doesn't match up, but that side does. Okay, so I don't need 35, but I'm going to go with something like that. So let's say I go to 16. I don't have an edge that's perfectly lined up with the corner or with the side, so I go to 15, and then I get that edge. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. And I'll have to make sure I know which one it is. It's the one opposite this bar. So this one right here is that one. Okay, so I'm going to hit C. I'm going to go to my points mode. And remember that if I have points selected, because I have a cylinder, it's not actually closed off. So for this, I don't really care because I'm going to take all of these faces here and delete them. I don't need those ones. The bottom ones I will need, so I'm going to go to points for this, grab all my points, and then go right click and say optimize. And that will seal all the points together. So now this is one shape as opposed to the cap being one shape and the side being one shape. So now I need to make a an extrusion on here so that I have, you know, some thickness. So I'm going to go to faces, grab all the faces. There you go, make sure we got them all. I'm going to hit D to extrude and then just extrude it in. Now I need to make sure also that create n-gons is turned on. I'm sorry, create caps is turned on, and that will cap it so that we actually have, you know, a thickness to it. And then I can adjust the offset further as needed. So let's say something like that. Should be a good thickness for our coffee mug. Maybe a little bit thinner. So it's at -8. Let's go with -7. That works. Okay, so now I need to create the handle for this because all coffee mugs have handles. And again, I want to verify which side this is. So I'm just going to go to my top view and just make sure I'm clicking on the right one that's going exactly to the left. Okay, because it just works better if it is. So now I can grab, let's say, this edge here, or this face here, and oops, maybe not that face. Okay, now it looks like there's two faces here. This cap area is actually poking through a smidge. So I'm going to go to my edges real quick, double click that edge, and then just scale it down, just so it's inside the cup and not outside like it was. Okay, so now I can go back to faces. I'm going to say these two. Okay, now it's a little bit tight, so I want to make this a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go to my edges real quick, and then just move this up. So this edge will come up a little bit here. This will come up a little bit here. So I'm basically isolating the thickness of how big those handles are going to be. Okay, so my handle is going to go from here to there. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to hit D to extrude. I'm going to extrude this out. I'm going to switch to my rotate tool, and I'll click this one and rotate it. Click this one and try to rotate it. There we go. Then I can grab both again, hit D, extrude it again, and go back to my rotate tool, rotate this one, move it down, grab this one, move it up, and rotate. Okay, so now I need to just connect these two pieces, so I can hit M and I can use my bridge. So I hit B, bridge from here to here. There we go. So now I have a handle. Pretty sweet. A couple things I need to check. This obviously wants to be smooth, so if I click on this, I hit Alt and I click there, make this nice and smooth, you'll see that I get a couple little crinkly areas. Okay, so stuff like this is a crinkled area. So what I'm going to do is go to Faces, and I'm going to zoom into my handle. I'm going to try to zoom into my handle. Oops, let me click on my cylinder, that's why I wasn't doing it. I hit O, and then I should be able to zoom right into this. Okay, so my handle is basically behind this wall. Yeah, let's see if we can see it good. There we go. So it's hard to see, but right here where the handle extruded, it made a cap. Okay, so it's no big deal. I just go into where that extrusion is and I delete it. So now there's no cap. Now when I did my other extrude, it did the same thing. So every time I did an extrude, it added this little cap inside there. And that's because I had create caps on. It's not a big deal. It's just a matter of going in and deleting where we don't need them. And then you'll see we get a nice smooth transition from here to here to here, all the way up. Now here we have another one, so I just have to go inside. Might be able to see it better if I go in this way. There it is. So there's a cap basically like blocking that up. And there's a cap blocking that up. And there we go. You can see the difference. Okay. So now we go back to object mode, click off. There's our coffee mug. If we need to adjust anything, we can go back to the cylinder, back to points, back to our selection, and we can select those points again and we can adjust them. So I can just move these back out if I need to make the handle a little bit thicker, let's say, a little bit more opening here. Okay. All right, that'll do. Cool. All right, so now I can double click this, call this coffee mug, make a new material down here. And I need some reflectance. My color will be whitish, maybe a little bit of yellow. Alright, like I said, it's not so important that you get it all right on the first try. It's more important that you have the base there so that you can adjust it. So this is where we're going to stop this one, is we've modeled all the stuff that we need to model, You can model extra stuff in here that you want to add to your scene, like maybe toast, maybe a plate, maybe, you know, a bagel or whatever. We've textured most of the things. We still have to texture the cereal box. That'll come next. And then we still want to add some other items to this. Like this bowl looks pretty plain. This cup looks pretty plain. It'd be nice to have a thing on there. Oh, we did forget one thing. Whoopsie. Whoopsie daisy. There's no coffee in there. How dare I? How dare I not put coffee in there? So same way we did pretty much everything else that we filled a surface with. Just going to make a little cylinder. Size it accordingly, right? The thickness doesn't matter because you're not going to see the bottom. But I do give it a little bit of thickness. And double click. That's just coffee. Now here's where I'm going to get a little bit tricky because I don't want to give coffee just like a brown color because that's kind of boring. I'm going to go to my texture here and add a gradient. Okay. Now this gradient, I'm going to click on the gradient button. And in here, I'm going to specify a different kind. So right now it's just a linear gradient, left to right. So I'm going to change this to a circular gradient, which comes from the center out. And I'm just going to double click the color swatch and just give this different shades of brown. It's kind of like that movie, 50 Shades of Brown. Let's go here, let's go there. We don't need 50 different shades though, we just need a few. And no blue. I don't think we need blue in there. There we go. We can also pick from here. So if I click in the middle of these, it'll pick a color and I can just drag it down. I can get rid of a color by dragging it off. Alright, so there's my different colors here. So I think the light and the dark too close together looks kind of weird. There we go. That's good. Alright, so it looks kind of weird still because it looks like a bullseye. If I go to turbulence though, look how it distorts what that looks like. Take my octaves down. Maybe adjust the scale of this. There we go. And that's not really doing much. Okay, absolute looks like a nice little touch in there too. So we'll leave that. So let's go here and drop this under our coffee. So now it looks like there's actually some sort of, texture to it as opposed to just being plain coffee. I'm going to go to my reflection and I'll add some reflection to this. Save it, render. A little bit too much reflection in specular. So let's crank the specular down some, crank the reflection down some. There we go, that's better. Alright, so that'll look good. The other thing I want to do is just add a little bevel around the edge of this. So I'm going to hit C to make it a shape. Go to my edge. Take this into lines so I can see the edge. There we go. MS. I'm just scaling it down just a bit more just so it's not intersecting the glass so much. There we go. So now we got our coffee, we got our cereal, we got our orange juice, a healthy, healthy breakfast. Alright, so I'm saving this, and then when we come in next time, what we'll do is we'll tackle the textures on these items here. Copy, Alt-G, copy. And then we'll just keep moving from there. It's pretty straightforward process with a lot of the stuff that we've already done. And these techniques can be applied across the board to a lot of different items. There we So cool. So I'll save, and then we'll pick it up next time.